Hey there, everybody. It's Cameron Morrissey coming to you live with another management and leadership Q&A session where I just field your questions on the fly during the middle of the week. If you have some struggles, some issues you're dealing with in leadership and management, go ahead, pop into the comments section and ask away with those. Hey, I'd also like to announce, some of you may have seen I posted yesterday, my weekend project this last weekend was getting all of my videos up on YouTube and starting up my YouTube channel. So if you're interested, I'd love to have you subscribe to that so you're aware of those videos when I pop them up there. And I also download these live sessions and post those up on YouTube as well. So if you want more information on that, you can go ahead and go to my Facebook page. The top post in my timeline is all about that YouTube page, and I'd love to have people subscribe to that there. So as we get some viewers coming in, hey Mohammed, good to see you here again. As we get some viewers coming in, why don't you go ahead and pop into the comment section. Let us know where you're tuning in from. Hey Sam, good to see you. Glad you like the content. Let us know where you're tuning in from, and if you have any leadership questions that you wanted to deal with. I like to start off these sessions with a question I got late on the prior live Q&A session that I didn't get a chance to get to. Dina Sweets, Mishka, good to see you again. The question was in regards to overcoming procrastination, and I think all of us suffer with procrastination. I know I do in my own work here, and so it's almost a little disingenuous of me to try to give advice on that, as it's something that I struggle with. But I'm going to go ahead and give some advice on that, but I'd also like to hear what you guys have to say. I don't pretend to have all of the answers in these sessions, so by all means drop into the comments and let us know how you conquer procrastination in your own life. For me, what's worked is actually having a top 3 priority list. So I've got items 1, 2, and 3. Usually our to-do lists are 20, 30 items long. So even if I can just tackle one of those top 3, and I can adjust my workflow for what I'm feeling like getting to. But you really just have to focus on starting it and make sure that you're not productively procrastinating. I use that term all the time. There are a ton of us out there that when we procrastinate, we do something else constructive. What we do is we do lower priority items on our list. And so we avoid those high priority items and do those low priority items. So what I do is I give myself a little bit of flexibility. And like I say, I pick those 3 and then I can choose from those 3. But I also give myself a cutoff. It may be a day, it may be an hour, it may be a week, but if at some point one of those 3 items is still on my to-do list, then I force myself to do it. So it can be before a deadline comes up, something like that, but what you don't want is you don't want those high priority items constantly slipping. So give yourself a little flexibility in what you work with, but also give yourself that cutoff and that hard cutoff. That's what I've used in the past, and that's really what works for me right now. If I'm working on the next book, or I'm working on the next coaching session, that sort of thing, I can bounce between those two depending on what I'm feeling like. But at the same time, at a certain point, the YouTube channel, for instance, I had to get that up because it was on my list for too long. And so you just have to knuckle down and get that taken care of. So I'm going to tune in, jump back up. I've got a lot of comments coming in. I really appreciate those as you're tuning in here. And hey, Tammy, Frank, Veronica, good to see you. Amy, Darlene, Kristen, Mishka again. So Mishka asked the question, how do you make employees understand a shift bid? Fantastic question, and I have a fair amount of experience with that. I've run quite a few shift bids in my life. First of all, Mishka, what I always recommend is that you're as fair as possible with the shift bid. Where I see a lot of shift bids go wrong is where they are far too skewed towards a few individuals. Yes, you want a few shifts that are really choice, 9 to 5, Monday through Friday. Go ahead and give one of those. Give a 7 to 3, Monday through Friday. But outside of a few really choice shifts and a few on the other side really crummy shifts, I always like to tell everybody that we're sharing the pain a little bit. So you might have 9 to 5, but then you've got Tuesday, Wednesday off or something like that. So share the pain as much as possible. That's the first thing that I recommend in regards to that. But Mishka, always let them know what went into the creation of the shift bid. If you're creating some sort of shift bid, is it based on seniority? First and foremost, who gets to pick first? Is it based on seniority? So make sure that you're as transparent as possible on that. but also if you have certain demand metrics that required you to have more people on Monday or in the evenings on a Wednesday or something like that, then let people know about it. Let them know that you're doing this thoughtfully, that you're not just, coming up with these things, out of thin air, that you're actually putting some thought into it. So go ahead and be as transparent and let them know what the spreadsheet is that you went from, what the metrics were that you looked at. So be transparent as possible, but definitely be fair with the shift bid. It always worked in my favor when I told everybody that yes, there's a couple of really great shifts and a couple of really crummy shifts, but most of the time everybody is sharing the pain just a little bit. And one thing that I'd also recommend with that, if you're doing something like a shift bid process, is also allow the employees to trade shifts. Maybe just a limit of one shift a week, but give them the flexibility to trade those shifts, and it makes that shift bid much easier for them to deal with because they know that, okay, on that once a month on Wednesday when I have that meeting that I need to go to, I can go ahead and shift trade with somebody and get that taken care of, and I don't always need to have Wednesday off. Some people really appreciate that, but the ability to trade shifts is always great in there. Let's see here. Casey asked the next question. That's, how do you address gossip in a distribution center where teamwork is the key? Casey, I always say gossip flourishes in an environment where communication is lacking. So you want to, as the leader in that particular area, you want to be communicating as much as possible. If you aren't communicating the information, we live in the information age. Everybody has too much information coming at them. And so if there is a void of information, then they'll just start taking guesses at it. And that's not what you want to have happen. You don't want people taking guesses at what's going on in the rumor mill. So you want to be sure that you're communicating the facts as much as possible. Now, in an instance where it's interpersonal and it's negative, it's important that you actually call that particular person in. And it can be an informal discussion with them and just say, hey, this isn't, the sort of environment that we want here. This is not, if you have a code of conduct, this isn't in keeping with our code of conduct, all right? If you have an issue with Sally or Stanley or whatever, then you need to take it to Stanley and Sally, and you don't need to be talking about it to all of the people that are surrounding them at work. Most people get this. We've dealt with this since kindergarten. So, this is not something that's uncommon for everybody. But just letting them know that you know about it is so impactful that they just can't get away with running rumors and negative rumors about people. So let them know about it. And if it becomes a recurring thing, then that can be something that you start documenting. But make sure that they're clear at the outset, that informal discussion, that this isn't something that's acceptable in the organization that you have. So have that discussion with them, but really kill it with communication as much as possible, whether it is communicating what's going on in the organization to everybody, or it's communicating with those people that are spreading rumors. And again, one-on-one informal communication, let them know that you know about it and that it's not acceptable. And if it continues, then you can start working up the progressive discipline from there. Sam's got a question from Washington, D.C. today, and that is, my question is about leading by example. When it doesn't work, should you become a boss to get things done? Yes, if I'm reading your question right, you are leading by example in a subordinate role. And so your boss is not stepping up to the plate, so you're stepping up to the plate. And in this case, yes, I'd absolutely recommend that you become the boss to get things done. There is no reason that subordinates and employees can't get things done for the benefit of the organization if their boss doesn't step into the batter's box and take a swing at it. That's your duty to the organization, is that you do those sorts of things. And who's to say that you have to wait for your boss to take advantage of opportunities? If there's opportunities that are out there that don't have a downside, that don't impact your work as it is right now, then by all means take those on as much as possible. But be a leader in your organization, and that doesn't necessarily mean that you are subverting your boss or anything like that. It can very much be that you are simply doing what you should be doing, and you're gaining valuable experience in the meantime doing so, Sam. So I'd encourage you to be the boss wherever you can in those sorts of things. Andrea asked the question, best way to enter leadership world after undergrad? Well, Andrea, the best way to do that is actually to have worked and cultivated some sort of leadership position prior to departing from college. So much of college, it happens outside of the classroom. All right, it's the experiences that you get, it's the network that you create, all of those sorts of things. But you can always start at the bottom. I actually personally did that myself. I left a career soon after college. I moved into a leadership position, and when I moved to Las Vegas for the first time, I actually started at the bottom in a non-leadership position. I had a great education, business degree, all of those things, and I was working along high school grads. And it's one of those things where after a year, 2 years, in my case it was 2.5 years, I was recognized and I got that first leadership position, and then it was actually relatively quick after that once you broke through. But there's no reason you can't start from the bottom and demonstrate those leadership qualities. The way that you want to do that, and the way that you know that you are demonstrating leadership amongst your peers and that your bosses will recognize, is when there is a question and when there is a crisis, do people come to you for the answers on what they should do? If you are serving others with your knowledge and with your talent, they will come to you when they have an issue that needs to be dealt with that is stressful in some way, shape, or form. That is how you will demonstrate that you are ready for a leadership position when others already see you as a leader. So be of service to your boss, be of service to your peers, be of service to the customers, and do those sorts of things. And when you give more of yourself, you're going to get more in return, and that's going to set you up for your leadership position. But I wish you the best of luck, Andrea. And if you have any other questions, by all means, private message me on Facebook, and we'll get those specifics taken care of. Stacy mentioned something in regards to procrastination that I love, and I do as well, and that is give myself a short break to mentally reset. Is a great way to give yourself a break. There's something actually called, it's time management, it's called the Pomodoro technique. And it was actually used with an egg timer to start out with, and it was 25 minutes of solid work and then a 5-minute break. And then 25 more minutes of solid work and a 5-minute break. And just knowing that you had that 5-minute break and you were forcing yourself to take that 5-minute break to help people to focus. I've used that sometimes with writing. I'll utilize that particular technique, but it's a great way to keep yourself focused when you know that you have that break coming up afterwards. Then the next question I have is how to address gossip. Good, we've dealt with that one. Razzie asked the question, how would you deal with a savvy and smart bully? Those are the absolute worst bullies to deal with. They're the ones that know how to play the political game to their best. I'd love to get some thoughts on this. I'm going to go ahead and throw out my answer, but if you have any ideas on how to deal with this, by all means, drop back down to the comment section and let Razzie know about it. Dealing with the smart and savvy bully is about kind of getting them to expose themselves just a little bit in what their behavior is. So whereas you want to address specific behavior in regards to a bully, you need to definitely be aware of it in regards to a smart bully. All right, when they are doing something wrong, when they are overplaying their position, when they are forcing you to do something that you shouldn't be doing, be hyper specific about it. Really know that, you know what, you told me to do this, I suggested we do this, and then you came back with no reasoning on that particular thing. So you want to get very specific with that particular person. You also want to be addressing those things. So much, I think, oftentimes when we talk about savvy bullies, we talk about ones that are very politically minded. They know how to be the puppeteer of bosses and peers. And you need to start upping your game in regards to that as well, and doing a little bit of a PR campaign for yourself. It's not something all of us are comfortable with, but it really can be just simple, threatening or demeaning or anything else, but reassuring people that you know what you're talking about and you know what you're doing. And so what it is playing a little bit of defense and getting ahead of anything that this bully is doing towards you, to kind of marshal the troops, shall we say. And if they aren't marshaling the troops, then that's marshaling the troops for yourself. So be savvy in that way. It's really tough to deal with the savvy and smart bully, but what I also always recommend in regards to bullies is not backing down from them. Bullies, on the playground, that was always the rule of law with bullies. If you stood up to a bully, the bully would go pick on somebody else, because they really are, at their heart, kind of chicken, and they'd rather handle the easy issues where people are cowering from them and letting them do whatever they want. So stand up to them, look them in the eye, ask for details on what they want to do and the background on why they came up with their decision and why your idea isn't better than their idea, but stand up to them as well. Next question comes in from Kelly, and that's How can I supervise for a company that is run by HR decisions only? Depends on what those HR decisions are. I've been a part of organizations where HR really kind of was intrusive, and I trust that's probably what we're talking about here, where you're really not allowed to put a firm foot down in regards to employees. There's the carrot and the stick. There's the positive and the negative, and HR doesn't allow you to do the negative. And so in those cases, what I want to do is back it all the way back up out of the HR realm. And I want you to get very clear with your team, Kelly, on what your expectations are. Now, usually this comes down the road where you hold them accountable to those expectations. And what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to be creative on how you do that. But you want to go out with a big campaign and a big communication thing on what exactly the expectations are. And then where possible, actually publicize some of those. If you have sales metrics, shipped orders metrics, order entry metrics, any of those things that you grade your employees on, try to post those publicly. If you don't want to put their names next to it, then you can use code names, employee numbers, that sort of thing up there. But let them know where they stand on those sorts of things. What you're doing in this case is, since you don't have the negative motivation behind it, what you can do is you can use peer pressure to your benefit. And you can also go out, like I say, very big with exactly what the expectations are. So everybody knows exactly what everybody should be doing and what the goals of the organization are and what everybody's individual goals are. And so they can't back away from it. And then you go ahead and you publicize those numbers up there, and people will see where they stand and they will self-correct themselves a little bit better. It's a tough spot. You should be able to have the ability to hold people accountable and work through progressive discipline if necessary. That's a very valuable thing that needs to take place sometimes. But if you can, then work peer pressure to your benefit. That would be my advice on that, Kelly. Christine asked the question, she's a 24-year-old administrator. How to get the older employees to respect her? Christine, really what older employees want is they want respect in return. They want you to value their experience. So what I always recommend for younger leaders who are overseeing older, more experienced employees is to bring those people into the discussion. Let them know that you value that experience. Ask them what they would recommend. Ask them what had been done in the past. Use them as a resource. Cultivate them as a resource. And then what happens is they will either give you a great idea that you can run with, or they will give you an idea that you don't want to run with, and you can explain why it is that you're going to take the action that you're taking. And what that does is it's win-win. Either you get a great idea, you valued their experience, but if you don't particularly appreciate their idea, then what you can do is you can explain why you have logic behind it. What they are seeing in you and why you don't get respect is they are not accounting for your experience and your abilities. And by bringing them into that discussion, you can describe to them what your thought process is, and you can show them what your abilities are, and you will then cultivate that sort of respect from them. But that's really the key to that. Marwin asked the question, it's a little out of my realm, and that's tips for startup management. Startups are tough, and it's very different from a culture standpoint. The key really to startup management is that you work your tail off, but don't forget about the profit, all right? Remember why you're there. You need cash flow in startups, all right? That's one of the main things. So be mindful of your cash flow. Make sure that you're selling something so that you can keep the lights on. I mean, hey, it's great to create a great product that helps everybody's lives out, but if you can't keep the lights on 6 months from now, it's not going to do anybody any good. So be mindful of the bottom line wherever possible, and really help just drive home the mission and get people as motivated as possible to work their tails off. It's a really tough spot out there. It's a tough environment. I know it's always been that way for everybody, but I wish you well, Marwin. Ahmed asked the question, how can we distinguish if an employee is ready to get leadership, senior tasks, or missions? Technical talents, especially as they often fail in leadership, though, they are top-notch in their techie domain. And Ahmed, that's a fantastic question, because a lot of us are in that position where most leaders got their start not because of their leadership ability, but because of their technical prowess in doing line-level tasks. And so then they were thrown into leadership because they excelled in another area, and really they're two completely different disciplines. I really throw a wide net. I throw a wide net when I'm hiring anybody, as it is, Ahmed, but throw out a wide net. Give them little projects, give them little tasks, and see how they work with those. Some people will very much surprise you in their ability to project manage, lead other people, or demonstrate other leadership traits in things. And so you aren't always the best gauge on that, and so throw out a wide net, but give people little chances at it. One of the things that always worked for me was, some sort of relief supervisor or relief, manager on duty, something like that, where if a manager or supervisor took a vacation, it wasn't that I shifted all the other supervisor schedules around. I gave somebody who demonstrated leadership abilities or was interested in leadership the ability to step up for that day, that week, into half of the shift, whatever it was, and actually be the manager on duty. And you see how well they do with that, and they get an idea of it as well, because you want somebody that when they are in that position is excited about it, wants to do well, and it matches their personality, because the last thing that you want is somebody who wants a position, gets the position, and then finds out they're not happy doing it. So that's the other thing. But cast that wide net and do little piecemeal things where you can give them some exposure and leadership. And that's really what all of us should be doing. We should all be developing our people in that way, where everybody is getting a little taste of that leadership. And even those that don't necessarily want it will find it valuable down the road. And that's you developing your team. Very important. So next question is... Let's see, I got a couple. Yeah, Jehovah gossip is the devil. You're not wrong there. Did you break Harry's part? Yeah, okay. Lynn, I'm glad these sessions help you out. I love doing them. I love the questions that we get. It's a good exercise for me, and I know it's a resource for everybody out there. Aurelis asked the question, how do you know it's time to leave an organization you work for? If it is time, how do I quit without affecting their general operations? Well, Aurelis, there's two reasons to leave an organization. The first reason is that you aren't learning anything. You're not developing yourself. And the second one is almost corollary to that, and that is that you don't have any career prospects moving forward, okay? So you're not learning, you're not developing, and you don't have any career prospects moving forward, all right? So those are the reasons that you leave an organization. Now, you can leave, affect general operations, 2 weeks notice is the standard. And you leaving the organization isn't going to be fun for anybody. And so, I don't want to say it doesn't make any difference whether it's 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or a month, but, give 2 weeks notice and then move on from there. In higher level positions, I know when I left my last company, I actually gave 10 weeks notice. And they took the whole 10 weeks because I wanted to leave the ability in my position. There wasn't anybody who could really step in as well into the position. It was a very side part of the operation. And so I wanted the ability to train my successor in there. So that's why I gave so much time on that, was 10 weeks. But you want to be fair, whatever that is. But really 2 weeks is all that you really need. Nobody will look at you sideways if you give 2 weeks notice, Aurelis. And Gina puts in here another point. She treats each employee as if they're leaders, and it's working well so far. No micromanaging, yet they know that I'm available as a resource. And that's really what all of us, big kudos to you, Gina. I mean, that's what all of us should be doing, is teaching them to be leaders, because it helps us focus on those larger things when they're taking care of their stuff and we don't need to micromanage them. Dre asked the question, what do you do when an employee has an issue with you being the boss and he is older? Dre, I kind of addressed this earlier with the younger leader dealing with older people. Bring them into the discussion, all right? They have valuable experience. You should be using that. So engage them and ask them what they would do in a particular situation. Ask them what's been done in the past. And what that does is that dialogue allows you to tell them what your thought process is if you choose to do something different. And then they know what your thought process is and how you come up with decisions. And it gives them a little peace of mind that you're capable of leading them, even though you happen to be younger. But do this over a long enough time, and they'll come to respect you for it. I have a 10-year employee who isn't cutting it for a variety of reasons. Lynn asked the question here. And has now reached a decision of making conference in the disciplinary. The next incident will result in termination. If this occurs, how do I handle the blowback that may come from her peers? They have cleaned up mistakes for her and helped her get her job done for quite some time. And Lynn, it sounds like this person is valuable enough that you're asking the question here. And so I would definitely do everything that you can, whether it is creating checklists for them, whether it is personally mentoring them every other day, every week, that sort of thing, to kind of light that fire. But what I would also say is that if they're 10 years with you and they're not cutting it now, then I would encourage you, if you haven't already, is to ask them the conversation of what exactly is going on. Why has the performance diminished? Where's the fire? Is it something that's in their personal life? Is it something that they've just gotten in a rut and they need new duties and new things that to excite them? But I assume they were cutting the mustard, several years in the past. So what exactly has changed? So you might look to switch things up a little bit, Lynn, for them, as much as you can in their particular duties, to maybe light a little bit of a spark with them. But give them as many chances as possible. I don't think that the blowback from the employees will be nearly as big as you think it is. If you've gone through the discipline process, if they're aware of the shortfall as far as expectations are concerned, sometimes it takes this sort of thing to get everybody rallied around what they need to be doing. It's not something that I like to get to in an organization, but I know I always share the example of expectations, and I once set an expectation that everybody disagreed with, but there was no reason it couldn't have taken place, and it was regards to an extra step in a spa reservation. And so we started writing people up, and we ended up getting one of our best employees to a 1-day suspension, and then all of a sudden, once that happened, nobody had any problems doing that step ever again. I think we had one instance of that over the next 6 months where that was an issue. And sometimes it just comes to a head where they're finding out whether you're serious or not. And so the other employees, because they've been exposed to this, I don't think the blowback will be as bad. They might not be happy about it if this is a cherished individual on the team, but they'll respect you that you're holding them, everybody accountable to expectations, because your superstars don't want to be in an environment where mediocrity is accepted. All right, I'm going to say that one more time. Your superstars don't want to be in an environment where mediocrity is an acceptable thing. And so especially those people will probably appreciate, again, prevent it as much as you can. Get with the person, checklist, see what you can do as far as duties are concerned, switching those things around, and do everything you can to prevent it. But if that person decides to keep going and has to be terminated, it's your duty to do that for them. So there we go. Chris Split asked the question, dealing with the next one. How do you deal with someone who is a know-it-all after they inherit a promotion? Even better, especially when it interferes with your own expertise in certain areas. I usually stay quiet, but employees question procedures and come to me. Well, Chris, first of all, congratulations that people are coming to you. It shows that you are set up to be a leader within that organization, and obviously the question itself lends itself to you being more of a leader, perhaps than your peers are. So, unfortunately, in these situations with know-it-alls, it's always tough, and I encourage, again, this is another great instance where if you have experience dealing with know-it-alls, drop down into the comment section, let us know what your thoughts are on it. Chris will appreciate it, and I always appreciate extra ideas on that as well. But when you deal with know-it-alls, I always ask the question, not why, but getting at that question why, but ask for details. Why would we do it that way? I thought we might do it this way, and that would get a better result. But put them to the test as far as their reasoning is concerned. They might blow right past it and bully you and say, no, I want it done this way. All right, but at least at that point you've expressed, hey, I think there's a better way of doing this. And you do that in as respectful a way as possible, and they are your superior, so you absolutely want to be a resource for them and supporting of them, and getting results is what really supports them. So, you want to pick your moments with it, but in those moments where you definitely have some expertise, where you have the idea that works and where they're going counter to that idea, delve in a little bit and find out why it is that they think that that's the particular course of action they should take. Throw out the alternative and throw out your reasoning to it and say, hey, again, this is your choice. You're the boss here. I just think that this would serve you better and be better, for everybody involved, and get the better results that you can report up to Bill, whoever the boss is above you. But I always ask questions. I don't let know-it-alls just throw out whatever they want whenever they want to. It's a form of bullying, is what it is, and you need to stand up to a bully whenever possible. But pick your moments also. I mean, you don't want to be shooting from the hip and being a know-it-all yourself when you don't actually know what's going on. So pick your moments, but stand up to them and hold them accountable. You'll also find lots of times that self-corrects. Like I say, this is bully behavior. So a lot of times they won't be at nearly as know-it-all fashion if they know that you're going to ask them questions as far as their reasoning is concerned. As that goes, here we go. Tammy's got the, yes, exactly, Lynn there. Jackie asked a question. She's from Oklahoma. Hey, I hope it's going well in the Midwest today. As a mid-level manager, how to work for a detail-oriented micromanaging style leader when my leadership style is for my employees to manage their work. And Jackie, I'll tackle a couple of different aspects of this wherever possible. I'll deal with the more difficult one, and that is where your leader is requiring you to do all of the work and not delegate it to other people. And in those cases where they're really asking you to be the one that's doing everything, what I want you to do is I want you to focus on what you are working on instead. So they don't have the idea that you're just, doing nothing while your team does all of the work that they think you should be doing. But also make sure that you're getting more updates from your team. If you're delegating well, you can absolutely ask for updates, but make sure that you know where the process is on that. And so when they come to you and they ask about a particular project, you can tell them exactly where it is in the processing right now. And if they question why it isn't on your plate in particular, you say, no, I've got Danny handling a certain aspect of it right now. I'm working on this. As it is. He'll come back to me when it's done, and I can let you know how it is. So you keep them updated on that. Now, if they're micromanaging you in particular, not that that isn't a form of micromanaging, what you want to do is you want to cut down on the interruptions. Part of the problem with micromanagement is that it kills your productivity and it kills your ownership over things. So you want to jump ahead of the interruptions of the boss asking for constant updates. So Jackie, what I want you to do is the next time that they give you a particular task to do, if you know they're going to micromanage the heck out of it, tell them what you're going to do and when you're going to come back to them with an update, and make it quick. If it's a task that takes 3 hours, say, okay, let me get started on that. I'm going to do this and this, and I'll come back to you in an hour with an update on where we're at. And so what that does is that puts the ownership of the interruption in your court, not in their court. So after an hour, you come back and you let them know where you're at, let them see where you're at, tell them what you're going to do next, and that you're going to come back and update them in another hour with that. And so you're giving them updates. They're still interrupting a little bit, interrupting the flow, but you're owning that interruption a little bit better, and so you can plan around it. It helps with your overall productivity there. And what you can do over time is you've built up that trust, because micromanagement is so much about trust. Once you've built up that trust, you can start extending out those updates as much as possible. Now, the other thing that you want to do is getting their feedback. A lot of micromanagers are really bad at giving the actual instructions on what they want done. So when they give you a particular task to do or a particular detail, ask them for the next step. Again, this is cutting down those interruptions and those needs to come back to the boss on a particular thing. So get that extra detail. So when they give you one thing, okay, when I get done with that, what's the next thing that I need to work on this? What's the other thing that's on your radar? So that you can handle that particular aspect of it as well. And so the idea is between the updates and the extra details that you're cutting out the interruptions and the need to micromanage by half, by 3/4, that sort of thing. And so you're just going to cut that out as much as possible. As you build trust with these sorts of things, that micromanagement can hopefully go away, and you've set up the mechanism now for it to go away as you extend those updates and get more of the pieces of the puzzle on things. But that's how I tackle those two crazy issues that we have with bosses who micromanage us. Pauline asked the question, how to overcome mid-level management when you identify more with the staff and when you are a bearer of bad news and the enforcer of bad rules. Um, so in a case where you're disagreeing with what mid-level management is doing, so much of the time is I would exercise that wiggle room. There's always that wiggle room in what the directive is and how it's actually played out. So you can absolutely use that wiggle room to kind of soften the blow for your team, kind of cover it as much as possible, but really try to be more in the discussion. All right. I know that you don't identify with the mid-level management, but you really probably have to, Pauline. You need to be a part of that discussion so you can get ahead of those issues where, you're becoming the enforcer of bad rules. You have a say in what's going on with them. You can go ahead and manage those and manipulate those as they're coming together so that they're at least somewhat palatable. If you don't have the authority to overcome the rules, then like I say, if you're at least a part of the process, then you can try to direct that so it doesn't have so much of an ill effect on your team. That's really the best thing to kind of get at the root of the particular problem. If you're dealing with, from a team perspective, what you don't want to do is you don't want to shoot the rules in the foot. You don't want to undercut the rules. Yes, you don't agree with the decision that came down from mid-management on this particular issue, but you as a leader have to stand up and carry those forth. I won't say that you don't necessarily have the perspective on things. Maybe you don't have the perspective on things. Maybe it's the correct decision. It just doesn't look like it from your perspective. But you need to act like those are the decisions that need to be made. And so as tempting as it is to undercut and say, hey, I didn't agree with this, at all. But what, we have to do it. You need to come in and you need to talk about what the rule is looking to accomplish, what went into the making of the rule, and that we all have a duty to perform to the rules that everybody has set, from mid-level management. So be supportive of that as much as possible, because you're actually making things worse if you don't. So try to be a part of the discussion as much as possible in the making of the rules, and then you can at least direct them to a way that is palatable, but never undercut those rules when they come down, because then you just make the situation much, much, much worse. Gina asked the question, what do you do when you're trying to elevate an employee so you can be a leader rather than a manager, but they are just not getting it? They're not productive and efficient despite training. And so what you have to do, you can just come to a hard decision on this, Gina, where, this is the baseline expectation and you need to meet this baseline expectation, or this isn't the role that's for you. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they leave the company. That can be that they transition to another particular area, someplace that they can excel. But if you're investing in them and they're still not meeting that bare minimum standard, then you owe it to the organization to look for a place where they can be successful either in the organization or outside of the organization. Now, if this is a situation where it is an employee who's performing to a base level of expectation, but they're just not exceeding it as much as you would like, then there may be a time where you just have to come to the decision that your time is better spent mentoring elsewhere and trying to get that another person to be a better leader within your organization. And that's not necessarily fun either to start from scratch there. But again, you'll be surprised at the people that will actually shine in leadership positions. So get clear on what those expectations are, hold them accountable, come up with some sort of schedule to move them on or move them out. And if it's somebody who you really want to see exceed expectations, if you're investing the time in them, come up with different projects for them to do, maybe different ways to expose them to leadership things. But if they're not going to cut the mustard in leadership, then you owe it to somebody else to give somebody else a chance to exceed into that threshold. That would be a fantastic way of doing it. Mina asked the question, I'm a woman leading a team of men. Any advice? The advice I give to women leaders dealing with men and men leaders dealing with women is very similar. If you explain why it is that you are making the decisions that you are making, people will come to trust and respect you and your decisions. There is a huge breakdown in communication between leaders and employees, and it causes all kinds of problems. So, Mina, the next time that you come down with a decision in regards to company policy, Make sure that you explain why it is and how it impacts the company, how it impacts individuals, how it impacts them, how it impacts you. All of the reasons that went into the decision being made. If you're assigning duties to somebody, say, hey, I need you to do this particular thing. Stan and the rest of the group are focused on something else. That sort of assurance in the leader is something that garners respect regardless of gender. And so I always just recommend the why. The more you communicate with your team, the better. What I like to say is if you don't feel like you are over communicating with your team, then you aren't communicating nearly enough. I won't go so far as to say there's no such thing as over communication. There is, because it affects you getting stuff done. But if you don't feel like you're communicating too much, you're not communicating enough. And so get clear on the whys behind your decisions. Let them know about what's going on in the organization, the direction, the vision, that sort of thing. Talk about productive things, but tackle that why, and that'll take care of so much of the respect issues, regardless of gender. Again, that's my advice. Jed asked the question, when your manager is not doing his job properly and he is not listening whenever I try to give an advice or fix things, is it okay to play his role and take decisions instead of him? Or he will feel like I am trying to take his place. Well, Jed, what you want to do is you want to be a resource to the organization and your boss, and you want to do the right thing. Now, that doesn't mean that you go and you grab credit for every little thing that you do, but yes, you want to step up into the leadership role where it's appropriate. There are plenty of times where it's not appropriate to do so, where you're taking on undue risk for the organization and you're stepping out of your bounds. But where it is appropriate, absolutely do that. Then bring it to your boss so that your boss can own it. All right, and that takes care of that whole, that you become a threat to them and they sabotage your career, that sort of thing. What you're doing is you're being a resource wherever possible. And that sort of thing gets around. People say, well, I may never get the credit if that's the case. No. If you do that enough, and if you're doing the right thing, the word gets out about that. Your peers talk to peers in other departments who talk to their boss in another department. It doesn't take too long for that to work its way through an organization. So absolutely take the decision on, step into a leadership role, get that sort of experience, but also make sure that your boss is kept in the loop after the fact and that he gets the full credit for it. Unfortunately, we all live in a world where there's plenty of leaders out there that aren't up to snuff. And that can be an opportunity for you. So take that opportunity, but do it with respect as well. That's my advice on that. Katrina asked the question, how to properly coach an agent. Are there steps you can share? Well, Katrina, when we talk about coaching, we talk about feedback, there's a few things that you want to handle in regards to that. The coaching should be specific. So you should be dealing with a specific instance, a specific trait, a specific thing that you want to see them be better at. And so you want to bring up specific instances. The more specific, the better. It is easier for them to apply the learning when it's a specific case. So if they have a particular call or a particular sale that you observed, and say, hey, what I would like to see is you did this in this particular instance. What might work better is if you did this or this. And you can be specific there. And so they learn better from that. And it's also not gray. When you start talking about things like attitude and you don't have specifics, or general ability and you're not talking about specifics, there's a huge amount of gray area where they can get defensive. So be specific. The second thing with the coaching is you want to be timely. Feedback and coaching lose their value the longer the time differential is between when the act occurred and when the coaching is given. All right, so you want to be timely. Coaching shouldn't be, I'm a huge fan of one-on-ones. I think doing weekly one-on-ones with your staff is probably the most important thing and the most valuable thing any leader could do. However, if you see something that's going on Tuesday and your one-on-one is on Friday, then mention it on Tuesday. If you wait, then it loses all sense of importance. The agent's going to say, well, it couldn't possibly have been that important because you didn't bring it up until 3 days later, 3 weeks later, 3 months later, that sort of thing. So be timely. So be specific, be timely. And then when you coach people, Katrina, you want to mention the positive and the negative. All right? They are doing things great and you need to recognize them. Too often as leaders, we are hyper-focused on the things that we need to fix and the things that we can fix. And so what you want to do is you want to do that, but you also want to be focused on where they're being successful. That opens them up to getting the negative feedback and taking that constructive criticism the right way when you are positive and you are negative at the same time, positive and negative feedback. So for any good coaching, be specific, be timely, and include positive and negative in the coaching session, and that'll really help you out. I know I got a ton of questions on here. I'm going to go ahead and spend some time offline here answering these in the comments section. So I'll spend some time getting through all of these. I know I didn't get a chance to get to everybody's feedback, but we're running a little low on time here. I'm going to do another session here, 9 o'clock Pacific time on Thursday. Would love to have you be a part of that. And if you tuned into this late, it'll be up on my Facebook wall. But probably by the end of the day, it'll also be up on my brand new YouTube channel, and I would love for you guys to subscribe to that. So if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel yet, then go ahead and pop over to my Facebook page, and the top post there is about the YouTube channel. You can get the link to that and subscribe to it and get the videos that are there. All my videos are up there as well. So until Thursday when I talk to everybody, I will see you all in the comment section down below later on this evening. Thanks so much, everyone. Bye-bye.